So I'm going to start this video out with a confession. I'm going to be honest with you here. Before researching this, I was not a fan of the character of Tuor. I mean, I viewed him more or less the same way that I saw the Vanyar elves. People who just accepted what they were told and contributed very little, only by chance. And yes, I actually said that. His extended family may have been major fuck-ups at times and tremendously stubborn, but at least they were trying to do the right thing proactively and not just sitting around drinking while the rest of the world essentially burned, literally. However, rereading the story for this, I now confess that I was wrong. Because I now see that Tuor was very much as nuanced and complex as any of the House of Hador, besides just being the good one and being the father of Elendil. Short plot points. Born to Rhiann after the Anarth and Nordiad War, wife of Tuor. Raised by the elves of Mithrim after his mother leaves him to search for her husband and is never seen again. Lives like a refugee and kept from fighting the colonizers, see what I did there, directly until they are discovered by a band of Easterlings and orcs and fights them. Becomes a slave, beaten by Easterlings constantly until he escapes. Then proceeds to conduct a one-man war until he finds the old Noldor city of Viniamar, during which time he develops an affinity for the sea, encounters Ulmo, the man, and told to go to Gondolin. Eventually finds the city with the help of some elves and taken to see King Turgon, currently the High King of any Noldor left in Beleriand at that point. Stays with them by the command and love of the king, marries his daughter Idril, and has a son with her, Elendil. Everything seems to be cool until the city's location is then betrayed and he fights to save it along with everyone else, but fails. Told by Turgon and Idril to flee with the remaining survivors, thanks to a hidden tunnel that Idril had made prior due to her own intuition. And after some years of living in relative safety, with Idril sails off and is never seen again, leaving Elendil to be in charge of the people. Now, the reason I didn't like Tuor was because I was focused on the middle part of the story, his time in Gondolin. But looking at his earlier life, I see now that he was just as badass as his cousin, Turin. So clearly I underestimated this dude. The House of Hador all seem to have the drive to fight in their blood, because Tuor wanted to fight the orcs and Easterlings in open battle, just like Turin, and yes, Hurin. And I think it's implied by the Mithrim elves, who were just trying to survive and escape Morgoth's gates, as it were, that they had a hard time holding them back most of the time. So not only is he like his extended family in a sense of wanting to fight, but is also similar in the sense of that they want to leave relative safety in order to kill said enemies, i.e. when his father left the city of Gondolin when he was a kid. Moreover, and surprisingly to me, I think also a large chunk of this comes from his mother, Rhiann, whom he remembered as an infant somehow, her telling him that it was because of the Easterlings that his father and their allies were betrayed and were killed. So between this and his experiences, I think it's fair to say that he pretty much hates Easterlings, and it showed. And it sounds like all this kind of came to a head when he finally was captured, having refusing to run anymore and fought the orcs and Eastlings who were trying to capture him and the elves. Now, being a refugee is hard, okay, but being a slave is much worse. And Tuor was a slave, and this was another reason why I've come to respect the character more. That he still had the Hador drive to fight and kill as many enemies as possible before, after some time, making his escape to the Western Sea thanks to Ulmo. So in a way, it's very much a similar story to what happens with Turin. Now, this is where things change, because this is where he has the encounter with the Vala Ulmo. Tuor is one of only 3 mortals ever to have ever encountered a Vala. It would be like being a completely reckless asshole before suddenly seeing the face of God. Everything changes after that point because it puts a new perspective on things. And that's what happened with Tuor. Learning that he had been chosen by Ulmo with a special mission also gave the angry young man some direction and purpose besides just killing Easterlings, basically. Because, for Tuor, life had become at this point about kill or be killed or enslaved. And, as a member of the House of Hador, guess what option he was choosing? He is choosing the side of violence every time. That being said, these were factors that Turin, however, did not have. Turin never encountered a Vala after his own escape and capture and torment by orcs, but instead encountered a broken elf escapee from Angband, Gwendor, and then once in Nargothrond, while he performed well as a warrior because, duh, he's Turin's kid, it also did not give him purpose and direction to direct his energies. Basically, that he didn't have an encounter with anyone who was able to literally overwhelm him with their power and majesty to the point that his own ego and issues fell aside. Now, there's a question of maybe Melian could have done this because she's a Maiar, but maybe because she didn't appear in that form to him, it didn't happen. So, who's to say? Either way, point being is that Turin didn't have the opportunities essentially that Tuor had. Now, perhaps the greatest tragedy between these two sons of great fathers was the fact that their single encounter with each other was by chance, and that also nothing ever came of it. In fact, Tuor only heard his unknown cousin shouting an elf maiden's name in the distance. And to me, this is always one of the saddest parts of the Silmarillion. So close and yet so far. And who's to say what would have happened if the two had gotten together and done who knows what, basically. But regardless, once Tuor is in Gondolin, it's his first real break in life that he gets, because Gondolin and Doriath at this point were the only two real safe zones for anyone trying to stay out of Angband's way. Its beauty is said to be on par with that of Turin and Valinor, which also serves to further quell Tuor's fire and rage, to the point that when Turgon decides to refuse Ulmo's command to leave the city, and also because he knew his father, commands that Tuor never leave the city as well, Tuor doesn't challenge it, unlike his father and his uncle. The hot-bloodedness of the House of Hador only returns to him during the fall of the city at this point. Having said that, I think that if Tuor had not gotten to the Western Sea nor encountered Ulmo, that honestly he may have tried to do the same thing as his father, his uncle, and his cousin. Demand to get back into the dirt of the world and do what he could to help those suffering or to make those who were causing the suffering pay with their lives. Tuor's relationship with Idril too is also interesting because, if I had to guess, I think that she may have been impressed by something in his father that then projected onto him. This is implied by what the Silmarillion says, that Tuor was accepted within Gondolin society because of the influence of his father, whom unfortunately he never met. I don't think Idril had a romantic interest in his father, just that, going by what it's implied, she, like the other Noldor, were impressed by him in some way, shape, or form, and that this helped his son in his relationship with Idril. This isn't Game of Thrones after all, where something like that would 100% be the case. So it was at this point that originally I did not like the character of Tuor for this particular reason. And now that I've reconsidered things, I now see that he has pretty much earned it, as well as his good fortunes not being the product of sheer laziness, but happening by chance, as it were. I'm not a big fan of fate, but if you want to say fate, go ahead. So, kudos to Tuor here. However, Gondolin is eventually found out, and Tuor now once again becomes a warrior, defending the city viciously, and even his own family when their Sindarin elven cousin-in-law, Maeglin, who, unbeknownst to him, apparently was also in love with his wife, tried to then take her by force or kill her and their son. If they ever do an adaptation of this needs to be a very epic fight. I'm just saying it right now. Anyhow, after this, Tuor becomes the leader of the survivors by the appointee of Turgon, who has now fallen into the Finwë family trait of extreme emotional despair and refuses to leave, choosing to stay and die with the rest of his immediate family and warriors, save Idril. So, what makes Tuor so special in the House of Hador's storied history is that he gained something that the others did not, balance. Tuor started out just like his extended family and displayed all the characteristics of that house. But his life experiences and own choices lead him to develop a perspective where violence and war were not the only ways to live, nor was despair and just survival. And it was for this particular reason that I've gained a newfound respect for Tuor of the House of Hador. But let me know your own thoughts below. This is the Miller Philosopher. Have a good day.